I was entirely absent from TikTok for most of the day today, and I also didn't read any news because I was busy. I had a thing down at City Hall this morning. I don't think I can talk about it yet. And then I had a bunch of parenting things that I had to do. But I actually want to vague reference this thing that I went to this morning. I know that people ask me all the time, like, why aren't you running for elected office? Or would you please consider running for elected office? And I'm very flattered that people say that. I'll just reiterate once again, because I get this suggestion in my comments several times a week. I am entirely ill-suited for politics, and being at a city council meeting this morning and listening to the kind of patience and effective communication skills that we have from our members of city council, that just reaffirms for me, like, yeah, no, that's not my wheelhouse. That's not where my strengths lie. Not that I can't work on committees, because I absolutely can. I'm not so aggressive in real life. Right, it's entirely one thing for me to yap on camera, right? I have total control of this space, versus working in a committee where I understand that I have a limited role and that I'm there to learn from other people, to collaborate with other people. It's an entirely different setup, right? So I don't want you to think that I can't work on committees. In fact, this may sound very weird, but this goes back to my perennial longing to live in kind of an eco-village co-housing situation in community with other people. And I was having this conversation with some organizers this weekend about, like, in my ideal world, I love these kind of long drawn out meetings where we can come into it with this framework, this we're assuming from the beginning positive intent in other people's words and actions. We are assuming shared goals and values. We're operating through an understanding that we are going to respect each other's dignity and humanity, and that we might have conflict and we need to figure out how to work through that in a healthy way. I really like meetings that run on consensus. Again, very eco-village of me. I understand there is a utility in movements like we see now, grassroots organizing movements, to have a board of directors or to have a panel of leaders, because meetings based on consensus can take a really long time. And there is also the potential for one or two bad actors to kind of gum up the works. But I do actually like working in that framework. Maybe when all of this is done, I still would love to be able to create an affordable co-housing community in Portland, because there are a couple of eco-villages here, and I have old videos on this subject. There are some significant limitations, and we have an affordable housing crisis here like most of the country. And I also think that we have very much a loneliness crisis, right? We live in a culture where people are pretty separated, pretty isolated from each other, and COVID made that much worse. And the current political climate has made that much worse. The regime is trying really hard to foment a civil war. They're trying really hard to pit neighbor against neighbor. And that makes it even harder for us to connect. And I think that's why it's so important when we look at what we have to do, the kind of work that we need to engage in to get us out of this mess. It's really important to think about, listen to what the regime is trying to push us toward, and recognize that, hey, we kind of probably need to do the opposite. They want us to riot. They want us to be violent. Okay, we're not going to give them that. We're going to focus on nonviolent strategies. We're going to focus on tactical frivolity. It's the same thing, kind of back in the before times when I talked a lot more about parenting. My parenting strategy very much early on was just, I'm going to do the opposite of how I was raised. What was done to me, I know, was not okay. And I recognize the kind of baggage that I have from that. And so early on, when I was building skills, and my daughters were really little, right? My two eldest kids are less than 2 years apart. And I was having to learn skills very rapidly. A lot of my strategy was just opposite action. It was just like, whatever my impulse is to do, that's probably because that was what was ingrained in me from my childhood. But I know that that's harmful. And I know that I felt traumatized by it. So I'm going to just do the opposite. I have a whole old video on how can I make my no into a yes. Very much in America, we're raised to be like, no, you can't do that. No. So just reframing my parenting through the lens of, like, how can I turn my no into a yes? Hugely transformative in my parenting. And it's sort of the same way, I think, when we look at what the regime wants us to do. They want us to be violent. We're going to deprive them of that. We're going to lean into nonviolence. They want us to have a civil war. They want us to hate our neighbor. They want us to be divided so that they can conquer us more easily. The answer to that is that we connect to each other. They want us isolated, alone, afraid, cowering in our houses. The answer to that is solidarity, connection, and community. We have to figure out how to love each other, communicate with each other, care for each other once again. So that's kind of a little bit of my mindset about why I very much like the idea of consensus. It's also why I would really love to be able to build kind of like a co-housing community. Like Cully Grove and Cully Green, but not $600,000 or $800,000 to live there. I want something affordable. I'm gonna keep dreaming. But at this meeting, this thing that I had to go to this morning for city council, I heard testimony from a bunch of other people in East Portland. Some of them I know very, very well and have tremendous respect for. And a lot of the faces were new to me, and I hadn't heard their stories, and I hadn't listened to their perspectives before. And gosh, I know I talk about hyperlocal power, right? That the resistance has to start on a local level. After listening to folks this morning, I just want to shout it from the rooftops, right? That is where we are most effective, is in our own cities, in our own towns, getting involved in local politics, local organizing, local support. There are so many good people where we live who have skills and perspectives that they can lend. The regime is very much focused on power at a national level. They're so power hungry. They want to take and take and take. Consolidate power in the office of the president, in the executive, consolidate wealth up at the top. They want this top-down control. And this is another example of, we look at where the regime is trying to exert power. We look at what the regime is doing and we say, that's harmful, that's detrimental. How is it that we do something different here to reclaim our power in a way that upholds the humanity and dignity of everybody here, that helps build a better America, a more functional America, an America that once again, well, maybe for the first time in a lot of places in America, actually has liberty and justice for all. They want top-down coercive control. They want an all-powerful federal government, which is wild because they're the party that was all about states' rights, all about small government till very recently. I don't understand how they've abandoned that. But anyway, I digress. So I think the response to that is to continue to focus on the local. We have so much power that we can exert here. We see SCOTUS is undermining so many of our rights on a federal level, right? As we watch them probably get ready to gut more of the Voting Rights Act. We look back on their Citizens United ruling. If you aren't familiar, there is a movement that started in Montana basically to undercut and dismantle Citizens United, or the power of that ruling. Probably should take a whole video and talk about it, but the Transparent Election Initiative is seeking to undo the influence of corporations and dark money on a state level. It's a fantastic way to render Citizens United basically null and void, and could be replicated state by state. There's so many ways that I think we've viewed state and local politics as like buffers, which we should look at them as ways to mitigate the harm that the federal government is doing, but also as pathways through which we the people can fight back. We have the most power through our state and local governments, just like we aggregate our power, right? As members of the resistance, as individuals joining up in grassroots movements, we could build the same kind of collective power through our state and local politics, through our state and local initiatives, laws. I don't know, at this meeting this morning, I just saw how many good people there are in our city government, both like paid positions, elected positions, and also volunteer positions. And how much potential there is in every city, in every township, in every state to reclaim and exercise our power and subvert the work of the regime, halt the work of the regime, topple the regime. When we look at resistance tactics, we have to utilize every tool in our toolbox. Gosh, I'm so encouraged by this meeting this morning, reminding me how many good people there are right where we live, how local, city, county, and state government, those are tools that we could wield. They want one big, massive executive, massive federal government control. They want a king. So the opposite of that would be the collective power of the people. They want bigger, stronger, more massive. So we need to go smaller. We need to look at the smallest level and see how we can step in there, create change at that point, build that kind of power in our communities all around the country. What would that look like? What would that look like where you are? Try to reclaim local politics, try to reclaim those local levers of power, and then exercise them to defend the people.